Along with the massive humanitarian situation, Russia's military operation in Ukraine has now resulted in a downward revision of global economic growth expectations. Forecasts have been widely reduced by analysts and professionals owing to unpredictable commodity prices, supply chain disruptions, and the risk of the Russia-Ukraine conflict intensifying. In this video, we'll be talking all about how the Ukraine war would negatively impact the economy of the world. And before we start, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Done? Let's get started. Russia's invasion of Ukraine poses significant risks to a global economy still reeling from the effects of the virus. The fight appears to be Europe's most serious conflict since 1945. As residents fled, Russian forces carried extensive airstrikes, grabbed army bases, and pushed toward Kiev. According to Western sources, the capital might fall at any time now that its air defenses have been removed. The attack came after weeks of tensions that had already shook the global economy by raising oil prices. On Thursday, the pace picked up. Oil momentarily surpassed $100 per barrel for the first time since 2014. While European natural gas prices soared by as much as 62%, Western governments are taking moves to penalize Russia as Ukraine struggles for survival. They understand that by doing so, they risk exacerbating the conflict's economic impact. President Joe Biden, who imposed further restrictions on Russia's institutions and ability to trade in dollars on Thursday, has cautioned that there will be a cost at home, where high gasoline prices are already undermining his support among voters. High inflation and nervous financial markets have left the global economy vulnerable as a result of the pandemic. Both could be exacerbated by the invasion's aftershocks. There is also a hazard to growth. Households that spend a growing proportion of their income on fuel and heating will have less money to spend on other goods and services. Market declines would add to the drag, reducing wealth and confidence in making it more difficult for businesses to access capital for investment. The twin problem of regulating prices and keeping economies thriving will become much more difficult for central bankers. The Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank have been preparing to tighten monetary policy in recent months. The situation in Russia may compel a change of heart. The size of the hit to the global economy will be determined by the length and extent of this conflict, the harshness of Western sanctions, and the probability of Russian retaliation. Other twists are possible, ranging from a mass outflow of Ukrainian migrants to a wave of Russian cyber attacks. In a scenario, a quick conclusion to the fighting prevents a further rise in commodity prices, keeping the US and European economies on track. Instead of scraping their plans, central bankers would have to tweak them. A prolonged conflict, a harder Western response, and disruptions to Russia's oil and gas exports would result in a larger energy shock and a huge hit to global markets. In the second scenario, this would effectively rule out ECB rate hikes this year, while Fed tightening would halt. In the worst-case scenario, Europe's gas supply would be cut off, resulting in a recession, while the United States would experience much tighter financial conditions, a larger impact to growth, and a markedly more dovish Fed. Wars are inherently unpredictable, and the real-life conclusion will almost certainly be messier than any of these fictitious versions. The financial market's wild swings on Thursday reflected the uncertainty. Nonetheless, the scenario should serve as a starting point for considering future options. In a best-case scenario, oil and gas supply are not disrupted and prices remain stable at current levels. Financial conditions tighten, yet global markets do not continue to fall. After the United States and its partners announced further penalties against Russia, oil markets reflected that optimism. The sanctions we imposed are unprecedented in history, Biden remarked on Thursday. Penalties have been imposed on 5 banks, including Russia's largest institution, Sberbank, which has $1 trillion in assets. Russian energy sources, on the other hand, were not targeted for sanctions. Oil prices fell as a result, with futures in New York ending below $93 a barrel. The principal channel through which the Ukraine war has an immediate impact far from the front lines is energy costs. Because Russia is Europe's primary oil and gas supplier, the danger is particularly serious. In January, rising energy prices accounted for more than half of the euro area's record inflation rate. On Thursday, European natural gas futures topped 140 euros per megawatt hour after surging as much as 62% during the day. When combined with the oil effect, euro area inflation could reach 3% by the end of the year. A sanctions-induced recession in Russia could have other consequences. More expensive gasoline and moderate financial tightening would stifle growth in the United States. The country may export more natural gas to Europe, rising domestic rates, inflationary pressures on the headline. CPI may approach 8% in February and conclude the year near 5%, opposed to the consensus of 3.3%. Despite this, the Fed is likely to look past the short-term price shock and proceed with its plans to raise interest rates in March, though not by 50 basis points. I believe it will be fair to move the funds rate up in March and follow with further increases in the following months, bearing an unanticipated shift in the economy. Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester said Thursday. Another option is that some oil tanker owners are delaying taking on Russian petroleum until sanctions are clarified. Major gas pipelines pass across Ukraine and could be damaged as a result of the conflict. Even a minor disruption in supplies could exacerbate the price shock if gas prices stay at 180 euros per megawatt hour as they did in December and oil stays at $120. Euro area inflation will be close to 4% by year's end, worsening the real income pressure. The European Union would most likely be able to keep the lights turned on. However, there would be a significant drop in GDP, pushing any ECB rate hike until into 2023. It's evident that we're going toward normalizing monetary policy. Austrian economist Robert Holzmann, one of the ECB's most hawkish members, told Bloomberg in Paris on Thursday. However, it's probable that the speed will now be slightly delayed. In the United States, this scenario may bring headline inflation to 9% in March and keep it close to 6% by the end of the year. At the same time, the Fed would be torn between additional financial turbulence and a weaker economy, owing in part to the European downturn. It may look past the short-term price shock and concentrate on growth threats. This wouldn't impact the start of the rate hikes in March, but it could sway the balance towards slower hikes in the second half of the year. Russia may react by cutting off the flow of gas to Europe if it faces maximum sanctions from the US and Europe, such as being kicked out of the SWIFT system of international payments. That's a far-fetched scenario. When EU officials ran a simulation of 19 scenarios to stress test the bloc's energy security last year, they didn't even consider it. Nonetheless, the ECB predicts that a 10% gas rationing shock would reduce euro area GDP by 0.7%. Increasing that figure to 40%, the proportion of Europe's gas that comes from Russia suggests a 3% economic damage, given the upheaval that such a historic energy shortage will undoubtedly cause. The true figure could be far higher. The growth shock for the United States would be significant as well. Furthermore, maximum sanctions could have unforeseen repercussions, including disrupting the global financial system and causing spillovers for U.S. banks. The Fed's focus would shift to growth preservation. However, if increased prices lead to consumers' and businesses' inflation expectations becoming entrenched, the worst-case scenario for monetary policy would emerge: the need to tighten aggressively even in a sluggish economy. Of course, the aforementioned situations do not cover all possibilities. They're focusing on the world's largest sophisticated economies, but commodity price hikes will affect countries all over the world, including basic staples like wheat and energy. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf oil exporters, for example, may gain. However, for most emerging markets, which are already recovering at a slower pace, the combination of rising prices and capital outflows could be devastating, escalating the danger of post-COVID debt crisis. Turkey, a major energy importer with a depreciating currency and surging inflation prior to the Ukraine conflict, is a case in point. Then there are threats that are difficult to measure, such as Russian cyber attacks. According to New York Fed, an attack affecting payment system at the 5 most active U.S. lenders could affect 38% of all banking assets, leading to liquidity hoarding and insolvencies in the worst-case scenario. One thing appears to be certain: Russia will be the hardest hit of the major economies. President Vladimir Putin's expansionist foreign policies will almost certainly cost him a weakening domestic economy. Did you find this video informative or helpful? Let us know in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on my future videos. Don't forget to like and share.